Michele Tafoya.
I'd like to see some law and order.
From Sideline Reporter.
I've been waking up every day with a palpable pull at my gut for the sake of my kids, and because I so love this country, I've got to start giving back.
To getting involved with the GOP.
It breaks my heart that my kids are being taught that skin color matters. And to me, if you want white people to step up, I was stepping up when I addressed the school and said, exactly. Why are we having these picnics for families of color?
And saying stuff like this.
Why are we even teaching that the color of the skin matters? Because to me, what matters is your character and your values.
Yes, but you know, you live in the United States. You know that color of skin has been mattering to people.
Can't we change it that it doesn't?
Well, we need white people to step up and do that.
But I think that they've been doing that since the Civil War, and I'm not saying it's perfect.
No, they haven't.
What do you mean they haven't?
She would leave her cushy job with NBC, covering the National Football League on the #1 broadcast team in the United States of America, to serving as co-chair in an effort for Republican Kendall Qualls' bid for governor, which he lost and would withdraw from. But now she has picked an enemy.
There's something, to me, really important about seeing someone like this modeling a different kind of masculinity that we just haven't seen. And I think we're kind of seeing it a little bit in the NFL with the Kelseys and Dan Campbell, this idea that big, tough football guy isn't separate from showing emotions and empathy and that kind of thing.
That being Mina Kimes.
When I see them leading with, because Kamala, dude, yes, they're calling him coach and whatnot, but in the same breath, they're emphasizing this man, the year he was a football coach, also ran the Gay Straight Alliance at the high school. That's really powerful in a way that goes far beyond politics and electability, which is what the discussion we're having. There are very few models of like that in American public life.
So Tafoya has heard from those in conservative circles and decided to punch up at Kimes. An article from Outkick's Bobby Burack, who you see here, an imbecilic writer with Outkick, Clay Travis's venture that was bought out by Murdoch Co. Burack is a man who peddles in misinformation as much as Donald Trump has sex with porn stars. So that article will be quote tweeted by Tafoya, and she would write, "I am sincerely embarrassed for Mina Kimes and how pathetic that her kind of masculinity means more than the candidate's record, which is abysmal." Kimes, a master at Twitter, would respond as such. By the way, very quickly, his record as it pertains to the state of Minnesota is this.
The list of accomplishments for this recent legislative session is impressive. Democrats codified abortion rights, paid family and medical leave, sick leave, transgender rights protections, driver's licenses for undocumented residents, restoration of voting rights for people when they're released from prison or jail, wider voting access, and adopted background checks for private gun transfers, and a red flag warning system to take guns from people deemed by a judge to be a threat to themselves or others. And that's just a few of the things done this session.
So what Tafoya is doing is intentional, because she gave up her career to be in this lane. His record when it comes to the state of Minnesota is the opposite of abysmal. But for a libertarian, it's terrible. Actually, depending on which libertarian you ask. You have Michele Tafoya, who is, let's be real, a newfound Republican publicly. And you have somebody like Jesse the Body Ventura, who is a libertarian and states that Tim Walz is legit and the real deal. On the Burack piece, he'd write, Walz also put tampons in boys' bathrooms, deserted his soldiers, and let cities in Minnesota burn in the name of George Floyd. Let's go one by one here.
The idea that these menstrual products are in boys' bathrooms, which, again, super not weird to wonder what's in elementary school bathrooms and obsess about it time and time again. But as the Star Tribune points out, that's also false. A specific but ill-informed attack on the new Minnesota law is in dire need of a reality check. Critics contend wrongly that it mandates menstrual products in boys' bathrooms. This has unfortunately been used to stoke ongoing culture wars over transgender individuals.
So the first part is completely inaccurate. On the deserted his soldiers line, there's a large backstory Bobby Burack gladly glosses over.
Tim Walz served in the military for 24 years, enlisting in the Nebraska National Guard at 17 in 1981, and then transferring to the Minnesota National Guard in 1996. In 2003, he was sent to Italy, where he served with the European Security Force to support the war in Afghanistan. He was also stationed in Norway for joint training with other NATO militaries. Walz specialized in heavy artillery and had proficiency ribbons in sharpshooting and hand grenades, though it's true he never saw combat. He retired in 2005 to begin his successful run for the U.S. House, representing Minnesota as Command Sergeant Major, among the highest ranks for enlisted soldiers. A few months after Walz's retirement, his battalion was deployed to Iraq, and a few people who served with him said they felt betrayed. Other people he served with disputed those claims and said Walz had always talked about launching a political career. Joseph Eustace, a 32-year veteran of the Guard who led the same battalion as Walz, said the governor fulfilled his duty. He was a great soldier, Eustace added. When he chose to leave, he had every right to leave. He also went on to work extensively on veterans issues in Congress. He sat on the House Veterans Affairs Committee and became its ranking member in 2017. Fellow congressional alum and veteran Adam Kinzinger, a Republican, defended Walz, tweeting in response to Vance's accusations, okay, JD served honorably, but he wasn't kicking down doors. He was in public affairs, which again is fine and honorable. Tim, after he was eligible for retirement, retired. People do that. If it was a real problem, he would have been stop-lossed and prevented from retiring. Reporter Tim Murphy added, Walz retired at retirement age, but more specifically, he retired to run for Congress on a platform of ending the war, ran ads about the devastation the war had caused, and then voted to bring everyone home within 90 days. That was, of course, unsuccessful. Now, the Trump-Vance campaign also has another reason to be careful with this line of attack, considering that Donald Trump is a literal draft dodger.
So the second line completely disputed. The third, I think it's wise for everyone to pay attention because Burack cannot think for himself. In two of these three lines, he has followed the lead of one J.D. Vance directly because Vance would tweet, Tim Walz allowed rioters to burn down Minneapolis in the summer of 2020. That is a near direct line in Burack's piece. From factcheck.org, it was Walz who issued the executive order activating the Guard, although he didn't do so as quickly as some thought he should have, mainly Republicans. According to local reporting, the approval came about 20 hours after Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey first phoned Walz on the evening of May 27th to ask that members of the state-based military force be sent to help local law enforcement. Some protests had turned violent the day after Floyd's death, and the civil unrest continued the next day. They would add, notably while Trump has often publicly criticized Walz's response, an audio recording obtained by ABC News this month documents Donald Trump telling Tim Walz in a June 1st, 2020 call with governors that he was very happy with how Walz responded in the days after protests turned violent. So look, we're already off to a raucous start with this guy. He'd also write, we only covered Mina Kimes' comments to question ESPN for allowing her and many other liberal pundits to break its ban on politics policy, but punished Sage Steele, of course, who is conservative for doing the same. ESPN did not respond to several requests for comment. Was Sage Steele punished for those comments?
From her thoughts on former President Obama's racial identity.
That's his thing. I think that's fascinating considering his black dad was nowhere to be found, but his white mom and grandma raised him. But hey, you do you. I'm going to do me.
You're the Candace Owens of ESPN, is what.
Wait, what? Where did you read that?
I forget where I read it, but it made me laugh.
Wow. I respect the hell out of Candace Owens.
So do I.
To suggesting female journalists welcome harassment by the way they dress.
When you dress like that,
yeah.
I'm not saying you deserve the gross comments, but you know what you're doing when you're putting that outfit on, too.
Yeah.
The answer is, it depends who you ask. Steele alleges ESPN disciplined her for those comments which violated her right to free speech and argued the company selectively enforced guidelines on political and social commentary. However, Steele recently settled the suit with ESPN and Disney Co. out of court, and the terms of the settlement nor the terms of her departure from the network are not known. Why is this important? Because Burack writes it as though it is indeed fact when it is a matter of his opinion. We don't have either party confirming nor denying because they settled. It's a nice factoid that he intentionally leaves out because his audience doesn't care. Burack would bring up his co-worker, John Simmons, a graduate of Liberty University, probably a tell, and printed, Simmons reached out to Kimes, who responded with this message. Hi, John. I don't have a comment for you, but I do hope you know that your horrible lies about me have led to racism and harassment towards me and my family for some time now. Please don't ever text me again. Burack would retort in his piece, what horrible lies has Outkick spread about her? Who exactly is harassing her and her family with racism on our behalf? Well, that would lead one to believe that if you print hit pieces about somebody and it results in that reaction, you might have to look in the mirror. But for Bobby Burack, he doesn't want to, nor does anybody at Outkick, because it does not benefit them. Burack would label her a victim in the January 2020 piece he wrote. As we know from conservatives, when this label is thrown, it's interpreted as being soft or snowflake or can't handle criticism. Labeling someone like Mina Kimes a victim is a huge problem. Furthermore, he'd write in another piece, sports media continues to shield Mina Kimes from criticism. He would criticize Stephen A. Smith for sticking his neck out for Kimes. He thinks Karen Bass is far left. Now, let me be very clear. As someone who lived in LA on and off for about 10 years, not only does this show that he is out of his depth when it comes to politics, it shows that he is a purely stupid writer who does not know the differences between, let's just say, leftism being a spectrum and the difference between a centrist liberal, a conservative liberal, a far left person, mainly as he probably believes it, and not knowing the definitions too. And I'm just giving you a piece of advice here, Bobby. Knowing the definitions of socialism, Marxism, communism, and not thinking that they're all in one, the same thing, because I guarantee he does. He also ripped Kimes for making the salary she does and said men know more than her. Burack went after legendary play-by-play man Mark Jones, where he questioned a black man's IQ, writing, ESPN has longed for someone like Kimes, someone who checks off the boxes and exhibits Disney's politics more eloquently than the standard employee. And to her credit, she is smarter and less incoherent than, say, Mark Jones. Where is he incoherent? What about his broadcast makes him not smart exactly, Bobby? These are just a few questions I have for an idiot like you. A headline from Simmons, his co-worker, read, ESPN's Mina Kimes ironically claims Aaron Rodgers subscribes to groupthink. He does because he thinks the COVID vaccine is ineffective, which it is. It is not. However, the one thing that they would continue to pander to, because conservatives are, according to the data, uneducated, it is this. Hey, the COVID vaccine was viewed as limiting the spread of COVID. That is true. But they continue to pander to this when even the data and the CDC and many others in this field have said it does not do that. Because, why? Science evolves. There are going to be corrections. They continue, though, to play this up over and over and over again instead of getting with the times. There would be a lot more. However, as we discussed previously, Burack was an up-and-coming sports writer who launched his own podcast from years back. Journalist Jeff Pearlman saw a gap in podcast episodes. He decided to do a little digging, and that deleted episode, Jemele Hill. Now, Pearlman and Hill were colleagues at one point, and thus she would share an email from years back of Bobby Burack. When asked if she could tweet the link to his podcast, she did. Now, why did he delete this podcast? Because it shows that he had an affinity for Jemele Hill. that he valued her work to bring her on to his small podcast, and she politely accepted. And now, because Burack couldn't break it in this industry, he decides to attack Mina Kimes, Jemele Hill. Is there a pattern here? Of course there is. A column from Burack years later showed how two-faced of a little boy he is. Jemele Hill does not appeal to the average American. She caters to elites, self-proclaimed victims, oh, there it is again, needs more words, and the wing of the population who demand white people continue to atone for their ancestors. Again, the underlying theme is this. Someone like this man, Bobby Burack, couldn't make it with ESPN, saw an opportunity to get play, maybe a little more fame, but in the worst way, appearing on Outkick, appearing on Newsmax, appearing on conservative podcasts, because they think his opinion is valued. A failed sports writer, Burack pivoted to being another cog in the conservative machine. Thus, he will gladly bend the knee to the reporters of yesteryears like Michele Tafoya, to stay in the good graces of Clay Travis, a man who cuts his checks. Mina Kimes and even Tim Walz are targets of his because it appeases his bosses, not himself.
If you can and are willing, please become a paid member here at TYT Sports. And or go to tyt.com/join. In addition, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Appreciate it. Have a great day.